All right, so fair warning, I am also going to share my story, but I am also going to orient us to a conversation that we hope to have over the rest of the couple of days. So it's going to go a little bit longer. So if you need to get a little more comfortable in your seats there, you might want to do that. Okay, so just this last week, I just got back from Australia. And while I was in Australia, I went to the penguin parade at Phillips Island. Now, I have to say, it was my dad that was the one who really wanted to go see the penguin parade, and I was really prepared to be quite underwhelmed. But I have to say, the penguin parade, I have to do a plug for it. It's really quite remarkable, y'all. And so what's remarkable about it, they're these little penguins. They're the littlest penguins that exist in the world. 40,000 of them live on that island. And what's interesting is what they do to come back to shore, to come back to the island. Right? So evidently that is they spend most of their time out swimming in the ocean, doing what penguins do. But then when they come back, the most dangerous part of their trip is coming across the beach. And so just offshore, they kind of float around for a little bit and they wait for other little penguins to like show up. And then you can kind of see them and they kind of emerge. And first you see one and then you see a couple and then they like emerge from the water and then they run across the beach together. And that's what makes the parade. And on any given night, there's like 100 or 200 of them that have decided that it's time to come back because they're tired. And they're really noisy, you know, and they seem kind of like noisy. I imagine they're exhausted, right? And honestly, it reminded me of coming back to the summit. And when I saw y'all in the room and I was like, oh, there's my little penguin friends, you know, and you meet together and we come back from all these different places across the ocean that we have swam together and we come back to the shore together to return home. So that was what I was thinking about as I was traveling through Australia. So that brings me to why I'm an improver. I'm an improver because this is the place and this is the community and this is the set of ideas, like a lot of people have said, where I am most hopeful and I am most optimistic that we can create the kind of educational system for our kids that they deserve, that fosters all of the kids' genius. I don't really think I'm gonna see that public education system in my lifetime, but it's here that I can see what the path forward might be in that direction. And that's why I'm an improver. So a little bit about how I got here. I was born a PK in Gunnison, Colorado. And when I was about 5, my dad took a call to a church in Denver. And we moved to Arvada. It's coming, Paul, come back. We moved to Arvada, and that's where I went to school. I went to school in Arvada. But around middle school, my dad decided that we should move closer to the church. So we moved into the city. But because I was in middle school and my brother was in high school, we were mortified at the idea of changing schools, so we went to school in Arvada. Fast forward a little bit, I go to college, I come back, and I take a job as a bilingual teacher in Denver Public Schools. There we go. I was placed in a first grade classroom, and I was interestingly placed in a school that was just down the street from where I had lived when I was in high school. And during that year, there were 2 data points that I learned, which are actually probably the reason that I stayed in education. The first, I remember reading about the ACT scores of high schools in the Rocky Mountain News. And I don't, for the life of me, remember exactly what the scores were, but I do remember that there was this huge consequential discrepancy, something like 16, an ACT of 16 versus 20 from the school that I would have gone to if I lived in Denver, that my kids were going to, and the school that I went to just 15 minutes away. The second thing I remember learning was that about 1/3 of the English learners graduated from high school in Denver Public Schools. And that was just an incredible amount of dissonance for me when I spent my days with these 20 brilliant children who loved school and loved learning and were just avid little learners. And so for me, you know, this idea of being an improver is really one and the same to being committed to being a teacher. They happened at the same time. And I think that's true for so many people that are in our profession, and I think it's something that in our profession we don't tap into nearly as much as we should. So what's changed for me, I would say, over my career is an increasing awareness of how little I can do by myself and how much I need co-conspirators in order to actually make the change that's needed. So I taught in New York City. I learned Dominican Spanish. I met a lot of different co-conspirators there, but unfortunately where I worked in New York City at that time in that place as a teacher, you were not supposed to be a thinker and you were not supposed to be a contributor. You were supposed to do what you were told. And so I went to graduate school and I learned a lot of really important skills in graduate schools, but what I thought graduate school was gonna be was where all the pissed off educators went that were gonna try to figure out how to transform the system and they were gonna learn how to do that. And that's just not what graduate school turned out to be. And so, it really turned out for me that it was in this community. It was in the improvement community where I finally found my fellow troublemakers and my fellow co-conspirators. And that's why I stay. Because being in community with y'all is the times that I am most hopeful that we can create a system that is more equitable and more just, and that we can trust to take care of the 20 faces of these little kids that I had in that first grade classroom. Okay, so this is the 12th summit on improvement in education. And I know some of you were here way back when in the first summit that Lewis was talking about. And I will admit, I was at Carnegie at the time when we decided to have the first summit, and I will admit that I was skeptical about having the first summit. We at the time were really heads down in doing improvement work, and it felt just like a huge leap forward to try to create a summit. And to be honest, I didn't think anyone was gonna come. Like good improvers, we made predictions. I think I said that I thought 2 people would submit a proposal to present at the summit, right? But people did come to the summit, and over years, the community grew, and as the community grew, it got more diverse, and as it got more diverse, the ideas get better. And now we are sitting at a place where there's these leaders and these champions that are knitted together across the entire country that have really accomplished some really amazing things. And so I wanted to start. And the lesson I learned out of that, quite honestly, which I continue to learn over and over again, is that you have to start before you're ready. You have to invite people in before you're ready. You have to share before you're ready, because if you do, you're gonna find your other little penguins floating around there that will help you scurry across your next shore. And so I wanted to start today and just to celebrate some of the accomplishments. We're 12 years in on this improvement movement in education, y'all, and I want to just celebrate just a couple of snippets of the accomplishments that this community has created. You'll notice that one of the prompts that were given to all the storytellers is that we should talk about what we're most proud of. And so I thought I'd start with the improvement work that I am most proud of. The first really big improvement project that I got to work on focused on the extraordinarily high failure rates of students in remedial math in community colleges. Many of you worked on that with me. The Uri Treisman used to say that remedial math is where aspirations come to die. And so this group, this network of educators across the country was able to create a new pathway through math in community colleges. They literally tripled the success rate. And the students could complete their math requirement in 1 year instead of the usual 2 or 3. And if you do some calculations, there's an estimated 40,000 more students out there that have completed their math level, their math requirement, and have been able to therefore graduate from community college or transfer to a 4-year than otherwise would have been if it weren't for this work. So really, truly incredible work. Our friends in Chicago, oh God, you guys are getting worse. Your run chart is like this. It's not like going up. Your run chart, you see how your data goes? Your data is supposed to go in the same direction on the chariot. Okay, our friends in Chicago, they are the ones who have taught us that a really powerful way to transform high school graduations rates is to spend a lot of time focused on 9th grade. And this is a graph, y'all, of 9th grade on track rates in the Chicago public schools over time. It's absolutely incredible. And our friends over here at Networks for College Success are taking this work and they're spreading it to more high schools across the country. And you feel free to ask them for their data because I'm sure they have it right there on their phone. The Connecticut Rise Network, also in their core network, they've seen a 15% increase in 9th grade on track. So picture like 600 faces of 9th graders that we might have otherwise lost. They're now on track. And very importantly, they've seen some closure in some of their equity gaps. So they see disproportionately large gains for students that started with really low on-track rates. So really exciting work. That doesn't get a clap either? No, that one? All right, core districts in California also working on 9th grade on track. They can say that 4,455 students in their network, because of the work their schools are doing, are on track. More of them are on track in 9th grade. A nerdy but fantastic graph that they're very excited about is shown up on the screen. This is from two networks, and if you can't read it really quickly, here's what it shows you. That they're able to both improve outcomes and reduce variation at the same time, which is a true hallmark of improvement. The Mountaineer Mathematics Master Teachers have been focused on math instruction in West Virginia. And they have a measurable improvement in students saying that they are sharing their math thinking in class on an everyday basis. Something that's really interesting about this work is that the improvement for students is also, they're seeing signs that it is also producing teachers that are more connected to their classrooms, that are more likely to retain and stay in their classrooms. So being involved in the improvement is creating a powerful force for teachers to stay in the profession, which is really important to us all. And I'll end with these 17 middle schools that are part of the CARE network, and they have data about all kinds of things that they have improved. But one thing that really stood out to me was that they can say in just 1 year alone, these math school teams were able to have 1,419 students, middle school students, that had increased their sense of belonging to school, which is really important. Now, I am sure there are many of you and many more examples of improvement that y'all are walking around with in your pockets. At least I hope there are a lot more examples of improvement and impact. And I would just encourage you to bring them up, to share them, to bring them to your advisory, right? So we spend a lot of time as improvers thinking about the students we haven't yet reached, but we also need to take time to celebrate our accomplishments, because these faces, this is why we do the work, right? And this is what keeps us going. So let's continue to do that as we go forward. So at the same time, we've also begun to build a field of continuous improvement in education. And what that means is that continuous improvement has started to get a foothold in the education sector. Ed Solutions took a look at the state plans that states make as part of the Every Student Succeeds Act. And they found that most plans across the nation have continuous improvement written into them as a strategy for achieving their state goals. I mean, this just simply wouldn't have been true 15 years ago. And 18 of those states actually have plans and systems to promote continuous improvement as one of the main ways of pushing the state goals forward. So that's a sign that some real change is at root. I know that my organization has been working really hard on building improvement capability, and we tend to do so on the more advanced end of the spectrum. High Tech High has introduced a whole host of people with their CI 101, and as Michelle mentioned, their fellowship program, which really digs into network leadership. Has anyone taken the edX course that comes out of the University of Michigan? Well, you and 53,000 other learners from all the way across the country, this has provided an access and entry point for people to learn about improvement. Again, none of these things existed 15 years ago. I also did a little experiment. I went incognito on my Chrome browser, and I went into Google Books, and then I went into Amazon, and I just typed in improvement science. And it was super interesting. It turns out that 5 out of the first 10 books in Google, when you put in improvement science, they're education books. And on Amazon, 8 out of the first 10 books are improvement books. So we have our own literature. Unfortunately, it doesn't include the book that I just recently wrote, but what it has to say made me a little bit sad, but a little humility. Yet, it didn't yet. But that's to say, you don't have to go to healthcare anymore to learn and read about continuous improvement, right? We have our own literature, right? We have that here. And then I think it's really important to also note all of the ways that improvement is getting into higher education, and not for a lot of work that people are doing, many of them who are here today. There's a large and functioning group, a special interest group in the American Educational Research Association that focuses on improvement. There are 300 members of an Improvement Scholars Network. I love this. These are practical scholars and scholarly practitioners that are advancing improvement in a whole host of ways. And as a result, you can actually learn improvement now in your institutes, in your professional preparation and in institutes of higher education. So the Improvement Scholars Network have documented 71 different programs across the nation where you can learn improvement. And there's this group, the Carnegie Program for the Educational Doctorate. It's a small but mighty group, a total of 2 part-time staff. But they've been organizing a network of professors that are really passionate about making the EDD more relevant. Anybody interested in the EDD becoming more relevant? Yeah. And what they have been able to do is that there are now actually 38 institutions where you can use improvement science as your methodology in your dissertation, which is really exciting. So these are all really important things we've accomplished over the last 10 to 15 years. And they're important for creating the infrastructure, right? The groundswell that can sustain and grow continuous improvement in education. And so the real question comes, where do we go next? What are we going to do now? Because we have accomplished a lot, but we haven't gotten anywhere close to what any of us have set out to do. And there's a couple of things we know about the future that's on the horizon. One thing we know is that High Tech High has stepped up and they've committed to making a space in their Graduate School of Education for Improvement to have an institutional home for the foreseeable future. And that's just like a massive resource. That means we will have a summit where we can come back together and learn and share and co-conspire. And that means that when you don't have a connection to a resource or a connection to somebody else, you have somebody to call. And we also know that education is notoriously impatient and fickle. And we know that if there's one thing we love, it's the next wave of reform, the next loop-de-loo on our roller coaster. And so honestly, if we don't do anything, we know what comes next with continuous improvement. We've seen it time and time again. We know what the sort of natural course of things is. And so either continuous improvement becomes a fad that we look back on, or we have to do something about it. We have to band together and organize and do something to fight against this constant churn of reform. And many years ago, I remember going to the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and they have this picture on the wall. And what this picture is it's the different phases of the improvement movement in healthcare. And what was really interesting to me about it was this idea that there were phases in a movement, that there were different things that you needed to accomplish at different moments in time, depending on where you are. And I found myself lately thinking a lot about this picture that I saw on the wall. And look, the reason I don't think it matters that you can't read the small print on this slide is because I don't think our improvement movement is going to look the same or have the same phases as the one did in healthcare. We're education, we're a different sector, we have our own path. But it does, in a really real way to me, feel like we're at an inflection point. Like we're at a shift between one phase and the next. And that what we need to do is step back and think a little bit about what is it that we need to accomplish in this next phase of the movement. What are we going to do in phase 2? And so that's something we would like to have a conversation about this year at the summit. And to kickstart the conversation, I put out a paper called Ruminations 3 that y'all got maybe in an email that you maybe opened, maybe didn't. But we want to have the conversation, particularly in advisory, around what is it, where should we go next? Push on the ideas, kick them around, figure out where you fit in and where you might push. And as Derek and Sarah started us off with, this is a really tumultuous political moment to try to imagine a future in. It's probably not how we would have planned it. Educational research has been decimated. We're not sure if we're going to have a Department of Education. Funding is uncertain. People are under attack. People are losing their jobs. The very idea of public education, there's been moves to undermine that very idea itself. And so it would be foolish and impossible to try to plot any sort of future without thinking about what's going on in this moment. And at the same time, I think there's things it doesn't change. It doesn't change what we want for our children in our public education system. It doesn't change that we want a system that's more fair and that's more just. And it doesn't change, at least for me, and I was really happy to hear that some of my colleagues feel the same way, it doesn't change for me this idea that improvement could be a powerful force to move us in the right direction. It just changes what we might need to do in order to do that. And that's something I think we need to talk about over the next couple of days and put our heads together on. If there's one thing that I think is clear, it's that this next phase of the educational movement needs a different kind of community and a different kind of leadership. There's no way that one organization could fight the churns of reform on their own. We need denser connections. And what that's going to mean is that in addition to doing the work, which is hard enough, we also need to have a mind towards contributing back to this community. And if that is how we build a field. Right now is probably a time when we probably need co-conspirators and we need this field more than ever. So let's talk about what some of our shared priorities might be. Number one, hopefully not surprisingly, is we need to continue to get results. And the results we need to continue to be bigger and more bolder than we've been able to do so far. I, for one, will be done with continuous improvement when I no longer believe that it gets results for children. And one of the things I love about this community is that when we come here, people ask each other, hey, how do you really know that the changes you're making are actually an improvement? And we need to continue to do that. On this slide is a starting set of problems that have been hanging around for way too long that we need to make some progress on. And I really think that the way you do that is you create proof points. You show that it's possible. You could do it in your classroom, you could do it in your school, you could do it in your district, you could do it in your network. But I, for one, for example, crave a district that can show that you can get every single child to love to read and to learn how to read, or they can stand up and say, you send your kid to my school, we can guarantee no matter what classroom that they're in, that child will learn how to read. And I know all of you have your own things, your visions for the educational system and the outcomes that you are passionate about. And so that's another thing I would like us to talk about, right? What are you willing to put a stake in the ground? What should be on this list? What should we be celebrating in 10 years' time about what we've done as an improvement movement? A second thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to evolve and deepen how we practice improvement. If we want bigger and bolder outcomes, we're going to have to push the edges of how we practice improvement. We don't have improvement figured out yet. You know, when you take a critical look inside all of our improvement efforts, you can use two different lenses. One is a subject matter lens. That's looking at what are the changes that you're working on enacting. And I think when we look at them, in some cases, the changes we're working on are just not powerful enough. They're not transformative enough for the outcomes that we're after. And I've thought a little bit about why I think this is where this comes from. I think in some part it's come from the fact that a bit in Michelle's story, we swung a little bit too far on the improvement side, right? We thought we could kind of PDSA our way into outcomes. And we've forgotten that actually it's the combination of improvement with really, really innovative ideas is that what produces the outcomes that we've seen. I think the walls between research and practice and that we still haven't figured out how to work together across those communities contributes to that. And I think there's some ideas in improvement that are getting misinterpreted or misunderstood, right? So this idea of do something that's in your locus of control, or the idea of starting small, has kind of shrunk the sort of what people are after when they're thinking about the kind of change we're needed, right? And so these are things that we need to do and push forward as we go on. You know, when we were working on the math pathways work, there was all kinds of changes in the math pathways. Some of them were really big and shiny. You know, some of them were structural, some of them were instructional, right? Some of them were about getting the nitty-gritty details right. So they came in all shapes and sizes, but they weren't about tinkering around the edges. And they were innovative in the sense that they tripled the success rate in half of the time, right? And that's the kind of improvement that we need to continue to build and we continue to need. I put 5 specific areas up here that I personally think that we should push in order to accelerate our improvement efforts. You might have different ones that come to mind and you should bring those up. We've gotten a lot better at getting frontline educators a seat at the improvement table, but now we need to partner with students and families, not like empathy interviews, but like partner with students and families. I think that if I had a prediction, it would be that would be the #1 accelerant of our improvement work going forward. Data is a pain point, but if you can get that right, it can also be a really accelerate your learning and your improvement efforts. Scaling is tricky. And I think we need to think about how we build improvement capability. In some cases, we make improvement way too complicated that shuts people out. And in other cases, we don't invest enough. And you end up with these real lockstep improvement methods, or you hear this slipping back to our old ways of working because the ideas are not well enough understood. So we need to continue to push the edges of what we're able to do. We need to be able to practice a fundamentally different, be fundamentally smarter and practice a fundamentally different kind of improvement in 12 years' time. And this leads kind of naturally to #3. As we figure out how to do things, we need to share them with others. You know, after Sandra and I took the healthcare improvement course, we were on this listserv. And you'd occasionally get this email that would say something like, you know, I'm so-and-so from Alaska, and I'm about to start an improvement initiative on, I don't know, ambulatory care or UTIs or whatever it is that they were doing. Does anyone have a starting change package that I could start with? I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we all had starting change packages? Wouldn't it be nice if we emailed each other and asked for your starting change package instead of inventing everything from scratch? And the same too goes for how we practice improvement. I mean, I, for one, as you figure out how to partner with schools and families, I want to know the nitty-gritty of how you did that. I want to know what you're learning about how to run a really powerful network that can scale ideas. And if we want this to happen, then what's going to happen is we're going to have to reserve a little bit of time and energy to create the practical knowledge base for other improvers, to give back to other people that are improving. And this is not an easy thing to do. I'm not good at it either. It's not what we do in education, but it needs to be the ethos of phase 2. Because this is how we need to feel this responsibility for each other and what they are able to do in improvement, and this is how we're going to continue to build the field of educational improvement. Okay, number 4, we need to learn how to make improvement a central and a sustainable practice. In phase 1 of the improvement movement, a lot of the funding came from philanthropy, and continuous improvement tended to be treated as this like add-on project that was added on to the already busy lives of day-to-day educators. It's not surprising, that's how we do most things, right? And Michael Fullen has this really interesting analogy. He talks about how sometimes when you look at a school district or a school, it resembles a Christmas tree with a bunch of shiny objects hanging in it. And if continuous improvement is one shiny object on a Christmas tree, we're just not going to get anywhere close to where we need to go. And so this is a place, amongst other places, where we really need district leadership. People like Martine are really important, because I know that there are a lot of you, district leaders out there, are trying to figure out how to integrate this into the day-to-day of doing schools. They're trying to figure out how to leverage existing funding sources. They're trying to figure out how to make those dang school improvement plans actually school improvement plans, right? So that they can move things forward. And we need to learn from you. So it's quite possible also that in this next wave, the funding sources might become more localized. So what do we need to do to get ready for that? Right? We need to put our heads together and figure out how to be ready for that moment if it comes. Okay, number 5, we need examples of districts as continuous improvement organizations. For whatever reason in education, we started with improvement projects and we started with improvement networks, and we haven't spent as much time or attention on how to support the emergence of districts as continuous improvement organizations, as organizations that are just really, 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 really good at getting better. And that's not to say that there are not a lot out of you. I've seen some of you today who are not knee-deep trying to figure out how to do this. This is just to say, stay the course. Because we need places where we can actually go and see what one of these organizations looks like, where we can talk to people who know how to transform an organization to typical ways of working to working in this particular way. So what do we need to do to make that happen? And then lastly, we need to just stay the course and stay in community. We're still 15 years later in a place where you do continuous improvement and you are swimming upstream in a system that is not designed to do continuous improvement. And when you are swimming upstream, you need friends, you need ideas, and you need co-conspirators and some people to re-energize you. And the summit is one place, an important place that you can come to find those people, but this can't be the event where we do all the connecting. We need a lot more denser connections amongst the community. We need people that are in geographic regions, getting together in geographic regions, people working on similar problems. I know there are people in this audience that want to write about improvement, and I know there are people who have improvement stories that need to be written about, that need to find each other, right? You don't have to do this alone. It doesn't have to be a big, complicated summit. You just create a space and invite some people in and start learning together. And as you go home and you go to the other conferences you go to, try to build the community. You can take steps in this direction, share your work, look for people who are engaged in improvement that don't have any improvement friends and invite them in, find the next generation for improvement and make them a next generation of improvers and make them a space to get into the community. So that's what I've got. Starting 6 priorities for y'all to push on, to pursue together, take a look at it, challenge it, change it, add to it, figure out where you're gonna sign up. Nobody asked me to write the ruminations paper. And in fact, I'm not a leader at Carnegie any longer. I don't work for High Tech High. I have a 2-person organization. We can do about a drop in the bucket of what I just put out in those 6 priorities. And to be honest, it has felt a bit uncomfortable, a bit overly audacious to step up and say, hey, I'll write this. But see, what ended up happening for me is about a couple months before the summit, I thought like, hey, actually I'm uniquely in a position where I could put a starting set of priorities down on the piece of paper that we might all pursue together. And it was a way that I could contribute to a movement that I deeply, deeply care about in a community that I'm deeply committed to. And so I just did that. And so I guess I say that to say, this isn't going to work if we wait for someone to ask us or if we need permission. You got to just figure out what it is that you have to contribute, and then you just got to step up and do it, even if you don't quite feel like you're ready to do so. And so I'm going to end with my little penguin friends from Phillip Island. I will remind you that they spend most of their lives out in the ocean, mostly out on their own in loosely organized groups, doing whatever it is that penguins do. And yet they come together because getting across the shore is dangerous, because it's the time in their life when they might get eaten, when things are the most uncertain. And so they float around and they find other little penguins that can help them get across that shore. And there's a variety of shores, dangerous shores that we have. We have the churns of reform. We have the difficulty of how hard it is to get systems to change. We have the swimming upstream. We have the moments that we lose hope. And I guess my proposal is that we make like a little penguin and waddle across those shores together. Thank you.
Thank you.